Continental Free Trade Area. EABC, in partnership with GIZ, did a study, and today it will be an opportunity to hear the findings. Our program will be quick enough. We shall have our opening remarks done by our CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of East African Business Council, Dr. Peter Mathuki. Then on the other side of GIZ, we shall have Mr. Bandi Shimis, is the head of program on EAC level. Then we shall have a presentation from one of our colleagues who took the lead, Miriam Mondosha. Then thereafter we shall have Q&A. Of course, this being an online event, an online meeting, we shall have ground rules that will facilitate us to have a good discussion. We shall make sure that whoever is speaking shall put on the video so that we can see him or her, and we shall all others respect what other are talking to us. In the time of talking, we shall be brief so that we manage the time well. Others who will not be, we shall see our video while not speaking. And our microphones, of course, will be off so that we don't hear the echoes. Again, we shall make sure to contribute to the meeting goals. Other discussions will not be allowed. Our meeting goals will be a discussion on Africa Continental Free Trade Area vis-a-vis private sector benefits. We shall focus on the topic, and because we shall have a Q&A session, you will all be allowed to send your questions through the chat room, and finally the meeting will be recorded for the purposes of future use. Myself, I'm Nathan Gashaija. I work for East African Business Council based in Kigali, and I'm moderating this meeting, having been designated by my CEO. Without much ado, allow me, colleagues, to invite Honorable Dr. Peter Mathuki. I'm sure he is online, so that he can tell us all about what we're going to do. Dr. Peter Mathuki, are you online, sir?
Hi, and good afternoon to everyone. I think we can start off this, and thank you for those who have taken time to attend this very important and significant webinar on AfCFTA. Ladies and gentlemen, you know very well, you recall that AfCFTA, which is the African Free Continental Trade Area, was opened for signature on the 21st of March 2018 in Kigali, and under the chair of the AU then, His Excellency Paul Kagame. And then from that time, of course, the leadership of Africa followed and queued in support of the AfCFTA, which is a very important and monumental opportunity for Africa, not only to the people of Africa, but for businesses at large. AfCFTA, as you all know, of course, brings a lot of opportunities for all of us as Africans, as businesses. And that is why the East African Business Council felt it's important that they partner with our partners to undertake a study. And I'm sure the study will be able to bring out some of the opportunities that we feel are available to our, of course, members, to businesses and across the continent, and particularly in East Africa. AfCFTA, of course, facilitates, and it's an opportunity to facilitate movement of goods and services among the African countries, in the continent, and of course creating opportunities that will be available for businesses, create jobs, and of course increase infrastructure development in the continent. We expect to see both road and railway lines running across the continent to facilitate movement of goods and services. For example, having roads and rail networks running from South Africa to Egypt, running from Nairobi, Kenya to Senegal, or from Tanzania to Gambia, and so forth. And this will be possible because of AfCFTA. As it were today, it becomes a very big challenge, for example, to commute from, let's say, East Africa to Central Africa by road. You have to, if you're taking goods, you have to go through Atlantic, and by the time you get, it takes a lot of time. But with the AfCFTA, it becomes very easy because now the infrastructure will have opened. But of course, we see AfCFTA as a game changer in the sense that it provides an opportunity to access a market of 1.2 billion people in the continent and a combined GDP of about 3.5 billion US dollars. And therefore, this tells you Africa is the next factory for the world. And that is why the East African Business Council felt it's important as we prepare to this great and monumental opportunity, bring out a study that will unveil some of these opportunities for our members so that they can start preparing going forward. I say it's a game changer because it also provides an opportunity, and I think as we restructure AfCFTA, we must bring youth on board. Youth is an important component of our population, and going forward, we need to bring on board youth. And the only way to facilitate youth is if we address challenges that are currently existing. For example, access to information, which we feel is very important. And with this, it becomes very easy for youth to participate in the AfCFTA framework. Education, access to education, because youth becomes the capital, the services becomes the human capital that will facilitate operationalization of AfCFTA. We are talking of access to capital. If we want youth to participate meaningfully into the framework of AfCFTA and take advantage of this market, it's important that we start providing opportunities for youth to obviously access capital, because that way then they'll be able to start now engaging into business. And therefore, as East African Business Council, along with other regional economic business councils in the continent, we have deliberately feeling it's important we come up with the African Business Council. EABC, in collaboration with the Commercial Business Council, SADC Business Council, the Framework of Business Council in the ECOWAS and in the Maghreb. You are coming together and we are discussing to put in place a framework that will support businesses so that as we get into AfCFTA, we have a meaningful representation in the processes of AfCFTA. And that is very key to us as EABC. And I'm sure as we go to the next phase of now listening to the presentation, some of these opportunities will be coming. And that's why we are feeling it's a high time now East African Community Partner States approach AfCFTA as a bloc. And that way, instead of competing as partner states, we start complementing one another in a way of trying to see what comparative advantage or what competitive advantage does one partner state have vis-a-vis the other. And that way, instead of competing, we'll be complementing one another. We'd want to see, identify what is good for Rwanda, what is good for Tanzania, what is good for Uganda, for South Sudan, for Burundi, for Kenya. And that way, we combine those synergies and approach AfCFTA as a formidable, strong business regional economic bloc. So with those few, I thank you and I welcome all of you to participate in this webinar. and feel free to ask, of course, our experts. And thank you for this opportunity. Nathan, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter Mathuki. Thank you so much for the opening word. Dr. Peter Mathuki emphasized that CFTA is a game changer. He alluded on the rail being very important, connecting the entire Africa. And thank you for the opening remarks. Let me invite Bernd Schmidt. Bernd Schmidt is the Deputy Cluster Manager at GIZ Syntec program in the ESC based in Arusha, Tanzania. Bernd Schmidt, are you online, sir? Would you proceed with opening remarks?
Yes, I hope you can see my video. Are you? Am I online? Yeah. Can I be heard?
Yes. Yes, okay. We can see you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you for the opportunity, Honorable Peter Mathuki. Congratulations to this webinar aimed at further specifying what is most relevant to the EAC's private sector to make the most of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Kirsten Focken, who is head of the GIZ CIMPAC program, cannot be with us today. She sends her best wishes. She's in meetings in Dar es Salaam, but I'm happy to give a few statements in this opening remark. EABC study positioning the EAC private sector to take advantage of the AfCFTA, which GIZ could support, is a very important starting point, we think, in making the voice of East African business heard on continental level. And only who is heard can make a real difference, not only in trade in goods and services, but also for investment in the region and intellectual property rights, competition policies that are beneficial to the 6 EAC partner states. GIZ fully commends the EABC's role in collecting, bundling, and reinforcing the inputs from the private sector and the partner states to create synergies for all who seek better opportunities on the continent. We appreciate that the voice is given not only to big corporate business, but also to East African SMEs, who are, of course, the backbone of the economies. And we appreciate the all-inclusive approach involving women-led enterprises and young entrepreneurs, as we have heard from Peter Mathuki. It is necessary and will be beneficial to use day-to-day language that make AfCFTA agreements and protocols understandable to all businesses who want to trade across borders on the continent. The objective of this webinar and the process to follow is to enable private sector, I think, in particular, to bring in the recommendations that have been found as part of the preparations for the operationalization of the AfCFTA beginning in January 2020. As many of you know, GIZ is supporting the AfCFTA process both on the African Union and the EAC level negotiations, but also implementations like the development and finalization of EAC partner states tariff offers and schedules on specific commitments for trade and services, regulatory audits, stakeholder engagements, etc. The private sector will be included into sensitizations for all of these by us too. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has significantly stalled the AfCFTA negotiations. So physical meetings cannot be conducted. We are having an online meeting here today. I think so far it's functioning great. The GIZ on AU level has supported the development of an online negotiation portal for the partner states to address these challenges. So we hope we can also make a little contribution in speeding up the negotiations again. Next to continental level, of course, national level preparations are equally of great importance. For example, preparations of trading documents such as AfCFTA origin declaration forms, but also AfCFTA implementation strategies and others. And when the private sector has understood the opportunities AfCFTA holds for it, only then it can raise its voice to shape strategic but also very hands-on documents in your best interest. And I think we are experiencing this actually today as a stepping stone for further developments. Last but not least, boosting intra-African trade must be backed by a robust and diversified productive sector, a vibrant productive sector, and a highly coordinated one, together with efficient trade facilitating regulatory authorities. That means key. So let me call upon you to keep up the good work, to find the opportunities in AfCFTA, but also the bottlenecks that need addressing. I wish you success in opening up further African markets for your businesses in the medium and in the long term. And for today, I just wish you a very fruitful webinar. Thank you for having me and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Band. Thank you for wishing Africa a very successful trading come January 2021. I also take this opportunity to welcome all colleagues, participants who joined us later when Founders opened. I can see colleagues from GIZ, I can see East Africans from Kenya, from Rwanda, from Uganda, from South Sudan. I also take this opportunity to welcome any board member who may be present. I can see the names of Mr. John Bosco Sagara. You are all welcome to contribute after this presentation. Without much ado, allow me to welcome our Senior Manager, SME Development, Miriam Mondosha, for a presentation on opportunities for private sector in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Miriam, if you are hearing me, please proceed. Straight to the point, my dear sister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Please confirm if you're able to view the presentation.
Yes, I can see it. Let me hear from. Let me hear from the rest. Let me hear from the rest. Can anyone?
I think we can proceed.
Miriam, you're breaking off.
Can you hear me?
This time, yes, but no presentation. Launch it again. Launch the presentation again and proceed.
That is fine, Miriam, you can proceed.
Now proceed.
All right. Okay, so thank you very much. So today I'll take you through a presentation on the opportunities for the private sector in the African Continental Free Trade Area. The outline of our presentation, I will just give you a brief background of the state of play of the agreement, and then we'll delve deeper into the opportunities that are availed by the agreement. Then we'll look at the role of the private sector in implementing what is entailed in the agreement. And of course, last but not least, we'd look at issues that would need to address collaboratively in order to realize the opportunities. So if I can just start briefly, I think it is worth noting the climate that we're in right now. We've been faced with a pandemic this year, and this has had a huge effect on the global trade. And this is, as you can see in this graph from statistics by UNCTAD, it shows that currently the global trade is currently at has declined by negative, by 27%. And of course, our trade in goods has declined at about 5% in Q1. And by April of 2020, this was at 27%. And as you can see, this is a level that is below even the initial financial crisis that had happened at year 2008. And why is this and how is this effect driven by? We know that the global economy has grew at a percent of 2.9 in 2019, and it was projected to grow at 3.4 in 2020. But unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the adjusted estimates are at negative 3%. And this is because the economic activity is the thing that drives trade the most. And why do we have these estimations that are currently at negative 3? This is a combination of both demand and supply factors. Supply factors in such that there's been a slowdown in supply chains globally due to the mitigation measures that have been put in place that restrict travel, that also has led to a reduction of the availability of credit. Also, the demand factors that affect this is the disruption in the consumer spending behavior. And this is largely due to the uncertainty about the duration of the pandemic and how it's going to affect the spending of the consumers. But apart from the pandemic, estimated GDP growth was already estimated to decrease. This is because of the rising trade barriers. I know we are both aware of the US-China trade war that is currently ongoing, that has led to adjusted estimates from US. For US, for example, it was growing at 2.6%, and right now it has been adjusted to negative 6.1%. In Europe also, the growth rate is around negative 7.5. And of course, for China, it was expected that it will grow at 6%, but it has been adjusted to 1.2%. And specifically for China, it's worth noting that economic slowdown is largely affecting African economies and largely also East African, being that China is a market for most of our commodities. And of course, we also import a lot of intermediate inputs and raw materials for our industries. And just to put things into context, for example, if you look at an economy of South Sudan that is largely driven by the oil exports, 90% of their exports are accounted for by China. So it really shows you economic slowdown in China and how it could affect trade, even in EAC. And putting things into context on why we need the AfCFTA and how inter-Africa trade has been affected in this. Currently, sorry. You can mute the mic.
To mute the mic, not be interrupted.
Still you'll come to add.
Thank you. So if you look at intra-Africa trade currently, it is sitting at around 18% as of 2020. And Africa is trading with Europe at around 54%. In US, we are trading at around 6%, and in China, we are trading at around 14%. And these statistics really show that Africa is not trading with each other. If you look at, for example, Europe, we are trading almost thrice the threshold that we do with ourselves with Europe. We are trading as much with China compared to how we trade with ourselves. And if you look at these three major markets, Europe, United States, and China, if you look at during this time, most of their imports, these are destination markets for exports. If you look at how they've been performing in terms of their imports, there's been a significant decline from January to May, both in China, in Europe, and also in US. So this shows that anything that would affect their economies has a huge implication in how we trade, and also in our economies. And this has been evident by statistics. By April 2020, Africa's imports had fell by 21%, while our exports had also fell by 36%. And to keep things into context, I think what the pandemic has revealed the most in most African countries is our over-reliance on external trade and also exports of primary commodities. This calls for a mechanism that would increase intra-African trade, that would increase the industrial base of Africa, so that we'll be able to trade more amongst ourselves, so that shocks in other economies wouldn't affect us as much. And this is why we largely need the African continental free trade area, and how its importance really comes to increase intra-African trade. So if I can just run you through the genesis of regional integration in Africa. It has been pursued ever since 1980, initially through the 1980 Lagos Plan of Action for Economic Development in Africa, which it's envisaged to build self-reliant economies that will sustainably develop Africa. And of course, this was later reaffirmed and given legal grounds through the 1991 Abuja Treaty that formed the vision that established the African Economic Community. And of course, the stages that were there in forming the African Economic Community started with strengthening the existing regional economic opportunities. And of course, in regions that had not developed any REC, so the objective was to form these RECs. Following that, it will be liberalizing tariffs and removing non-tariff barriers in each REC. And of course, the crucial stage, which is the third one, is establishing a free trade area, which is the AfCFTA in this case. And of course, after that, we'll be moving to customs union, common market, and eventually having a monetary union and Pan-African Parliament. Yeah, so regional integration in Africa has also been supported by various continental initiatives that have been put in place. Largely, if I can just touch on, for example, Agenda 2063, which is meant to provide a blueprint that would transform Africa into becoming a global powerhouse. We've also had various initiatives like boosting intra-African Trade Action Plan of 2019. We have the CADEP, and of course, the recent initiative, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area. With this, the existing regional economic opportunities are supposed to act as building blocks for the AfCFTA. And the African Union currently has recognized 8 regional economic opportunities. And of course, these current recs, they differ in terms of their structure, their priorities, and also the level of integration. I think some have reached even a level of having a common external tariff, while others are still at a free trade area, and others have not even started any trade initiatives. But despite these differences, I think all regional economic opportunities are driven by the same objective, which is enhancing the competitiveness for sustainable socioeconomic development of African states. Now, looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area, the agreement that establishes it, as it was previously communicated by the CEO, it was signed on the 21st March of 2018 on the 10th Extraordinary Summit of the EU Assembly in Kigali, Rwanda. And of course, the AfCFTA is the most ambitious integration initiative, which is intended to encompass about 55 member states of the African Union, making it the world's largest free trade area since the formation of the WTO. Currently, the agreement has entered into force, and this was done in the 30th of May 2019, which is in line with Article 23, where after 22 countries have submitted, they have deposited the instruments of ratification, the agreement would enter into force. Currently, 28 countries have ratified, with Cameroon and Angola in the final stages of finalizing the ratification process, which will hopefully make it to 30 ratifications. And of course, signing the agreement is not sufficient. State parties implement this agreement. You become a state party after you ratify. And of course, the current status of the AfCFTA, it has entered into force, but it is not yet started the implementation. It is expected that trade will commence on the 1st of January in 2021, upon, of course, completion of the negotiations of rules of origin and also tariff concession. In line with Article 3, the agreement entails creating a single market for goods, services, and also facilitating a movement of persons. And this will be through liberalizing goods, services through successive rounds of negotiations. And this would, of course, lay the foundation of creating a continental customs union, and also ensuring that there's an inclusive socioeconomic development that looks at gender equality and also structural transformations of the state party. In terms of its institution, the AfCFTA would be it will be run by an oversight and guidance of the agreement through the assembly, which consists of the heads of state. And then it will also have a council of ministers that would report to the assembly. We also have a committee of senior trade officials, which are permanent secretaries, and these will be dealing with the development of programs and action plans. And of course, would have the secretariat that would coordinate the implementation of all activities. And last but not least, would have a dispute settlement mechanism in place also. In terms of what the agreement entails and what will be negotiated, first we have the protocol of trade in goods, trade in services, and also the protocol of rules and procedures of settlement of disputes. These first three protocols would be negotiated in the first phase of the negotiations, and I think they are currently in progress. In terms of trade in goods, What is pending is the tariff concessions and of course the rules of origin that will dictate the goods that will be given preferential treatment. In terms of trading services, liberalization will be done on a few priority sectors that have been highlighted, and we'll see later on in the presentation. And of course, in the second phase of the negotiations, phase 2, what will be negotiated is the protocol on the competition policy, a protocol on investment, and also protocol on intellectual property rights. And of course, by the decision of the Assembly recently, they've also added a protocol on e-commerce that will also be negotiated in round 2 of the negotiations. Now, down to the most important part of this webinar, which are the opportunities for the private sector. The whole agreement is premised under one key driver, which is increasing intra-African trade. As shown below, there's a need to really focus on increasing inter-African trade so that we are somehow resistant to the shocks of the external environment. Of course, the agreement prioritizes addressing a few challenges, particularly in trade policy, productive capacity, infrastructure, and also trade finance and information. And this is through a framework that has been put in place of resolving non-tariff barriers for both goods and services on a most favored nation basis. And of course, various simulations have been done on this, and it shows that 50% of the NTBs that are currently in African countries will be resolved within the context of the AfCFTA. And this is good news for the private sector in terms of accessing markets. And of course, the agreement is expected to mandate state parties to progressively remove tariffs on at least 97% of tariff lines. And of course, this accounts for 90% of intra-African imports. The agreement also looks at the differences in terms of the level of development in African countries to ensure that there's equity in this. The middle-income countries in the first round where 90% of the tariff lines are expected to be eliminated. The middle-income countries will be given 5 years to implement that, while LDCs will be given a period of 10 years to adjust. And in terms of the sensitive list, which is the elimination of now the 7% of the tariff lines, middle-income countries will be given a 5-year, while for LDCs will be given a leeway of 10 years. And of course, the agreement also provides, of course, the trade facilitation agreement provides the framework for trade facilitation reforms, but the agreement of the AfCFTA, it provides the move and the momentum to really facilitate trade in terms of reducing the time and cost of compliance. And this, of course, has multiplier effects in reducing the price of exports and making our commodities competitive, and also reducing also the price of imports in terms of the raw materials and intermediate goods that our industries will need. In terms of the target market, as the agreement is intended to encompass 55 member states, we are looking at an estimated market of about 1.3 billion people. And out of these estimations have been shown to show an increase from 1.3 to 1.7 billion by 2030, out of which 600 million people will be in middle class. I think this is good news in terms of the consumer spending. And also in terms of investment and consumer spending, it is expected that it will amount to about 4 trillion US dollars. Looking at the opportunity brought about by this market, I think it is within the private sector to now implement forward-looking business decisions so that they can integrate easily into the continental and also global value chains in order to realize these opportunities. And of course, in terms of the welfare gains, it is expected that the agreement would bring 20 million people out of extreme poverty and about 60 million people out of moderate poverty. And this is expected to be done by 2035. In terms of industrial development, the agreement is expected to be the driver of industrial development in our continent. Of course, most of our countries have a shallow industrial base. We also have limited productive capacities. I think this is due to the nature of our economies being largely driven by SMEs and also the informality in our economies. We also have a problem with economies of scale. I think most goods that are produced in African countries are not competitive due to various costs such as energy and so on. And so what the agreement provides is a framework of establishing value chains across the continent. And this would be under the premise of specializing in trade. I think as the CEO had pointed out earlier in his presentation, we expect to be a specialization in trade in terms of our competitive advantages and of course value addition in this. In our region, let's say, for example, if Uganda is very competitive in producing industrial sugar, it is expected of us as a region, for example, for Rwanda to invest more in cultivating sugarcane. And of course, maybe Tanzania or Kenya could invest in the distribution and logistics of this. So it is expected that the agreement will drive industrial development through this formation of these value chains. And of course, as we expect, the agreement will eliminate about 90% of the tariffs. That is expected to bring access to cheaper raw materials and intermediate inputs for our industries. And this is expected to trickle down to reduction of commodities for our goods due to the reduction of trade costs. And of course, among the commodities that have been seen to experience an expansion of exports a lot is, of course, manufacturers, followed by energy-intensive manufacturing, chemicals, rubber, plastics, and also processed foods have been seen to be projected to see an expansion of exports. So these are the sectors that I think the private sector can focus on in taking advantage of the agreement. In terms of services, it was also seen that health, education, transport would also see a huge increase. Now moving on to the protocol of trade in services, which is also the most important. We've seen the agreement provides for commitments in 5 priority sectors in this, being the financial, travel, transport, business services, and also communications. And of course, Mode 3, which is commercial presence under trade in services, it provides for rules about FDI, investment promotion and facilitation. So we expect to also see a lot of FDI flowing into the continent. We also expect to see harmonization of the rules of transport services, and of course this would reduce congestion at the border posts. In terms of the protocol on e-commerce, I think we also in an era where we've seen an increase of e-commerce during this time due to the restrictions in physical trade. And e-commerce is expected to provide market access significantly in implementing this agreement. E-commerce breaks the barriers of physical presence and also time constraints. We've seen it flourishing during this time, and of course with e-commerce we also expect that enabling services from the government will also move to digital. Hence I would see a reduction in the compliance costs for businesses. Now, in terms of implementing the agreement, I would ask ourselves what is the private sector expected to do? Of course, as any trade agreement, the private sector is the focal person for the agreement. The private sector is supposed to see the real benefits of the agreement and, of course, implement it through trade. And here we call this encompasses exporters, importers, and all service providers. So the agreement is also supposed to show the real benefits in order for the private sector to actually trade. So the role of the private sector is actually active participation in terms of doing the actual trade. Also, private sector actors in the compliance mechanism. And here it's about whistleblowing in areas that are contrary to the agreement. For example, there can be a mechanism of reporting non-tariff barriers, and we expect the private sector to be the key actors in ensuring compliance of the agreement. Also, private sector as key beneficiaries of the agreement are the owners of the dialogue platforms, and this is in making sure that the views of the private sector are clearly articulated in the policy formulation processes at the continental level. And of course, we also expect that there's a lot of capacity building for the private sector that has to be done in terms of awareness of the opportunities available, and of course how to take advantage of the agreement. And of course, last but not least, which has also been highlighted in the CEO's opening remarks, is a need for an active institutional framework at the continental level that will unite the private sector to speak with one voice in terms of influencing policies and regulations at the continental level to ensure that African businesses can easily trade and invest. So there is an ongoing conversation about the formation of the African Business Council, which in terms of its composition, it's expected to have members of the business councils in each regional economic opportunities. Also, large companies will also be members of those. And of course, SMEs are also a part of that composition. And as said, the African Business Council is expected to be the apex body of the private sector at the continental level that would unite the private sector all across Africa in terms of making sure that the private sector is at par with every decision that is made at the continental level with regards to implementing the agreement. Also, the current status of the African Business Council currently The framework of the agreement and its constitution have already been drafted, and of course, East African Business Council is also a part of that conversation in collaboration with other business councils in the continent. Well, of course, in order to, last but not least, in order to realize all the opportunities that have been highlighted in this agreement, I think it is also important to highlight the need for having the political will. I think implementing the agreement will not be successful if we do not have the political will. And this can be in terms of currently, even in our region in East Africa, we've seen some partner states have not yet ratified the agreement, despite, of course, the opportunities that are availed. So this calls on having a strong political will in order to drive this process. And this also touches upon the issues of trust, and changing the mindset about regional integration and being able to balance national interests versus regional integrations and opportunities that it avails. And of course, this will also help in creating awareness in order for the agreement to be implemented successfully. Everyone needs to be aware, not only the private sector, but also the citizens, which are the real beneficiaries of this agreement. And in line with that, also we need to have a lot of capacity building initiatives because about, for example, if you look at East Africa, 70% of our economy is informal. So we really need to really go down to the grassroots to make sure that everyone is capacitated enough to take advantage of what is availed by the agreement. Also, in order for this to be successful, we need to realize the real benefits. I think we've said a lot about what is expected in terms of resolving NTBs, in terms of trade facilitation, in terms of elimination of tariffs, but this has to be practical in order for the private sector to really see that there's the real benefits from the agreement, so that we just don't establish this agreement, but on the ground there's no trade that is happening. And of course, in line with this, we also need to ensure that there's synergy within existing initiatives. As we said, our regional economic communities will be building blocks for the AfCFTA. So we need to ensure that the synergy in how we build onto the continental framework, and of course, looking at the already established initiatives such as the tripartite free trade area that is in place. And of course, if you look at our regional economic community of EAC, we've already reached a higher level of integration, which is having the common external tariff. So we need to build on that in order to successfully implement also the CFTA. Looking at also number 5, which is on the regional lessons. I think most countries are part of already existing RECs, SADC, EAC, COMESA, and many others. I think we need to look at what has been slowing down integration in those RECs, and we build on those lessons so that we don't repeat the same thing at the continental level. I think we've had a lot of recurring NTBs within these RECs. We've had also issues of balancing between national interests and regional integration. So these are the lessons that I think we also need to build on in order to ensure that we realize the benefits of the AfCFTA. There's also a need of having a strong dispute settlement mechanism at the continental level. And this is also a lesson from the implementation of the current protocols in each REC. Number 7, we as the private sector and collaboratively, of course, with the government, we need to look at the trade supply constraints currently. We need to look at the capabilities of firms in terms of supplying goods, in terms of looking at the enablers, for example, customs procedures, and how infrastructure also affects trade supply constraints. So this is something that as a region, as countries, as also as the private sector, looking at the individual firms, also need to look at how we can reform our structures in order to realize the opportunities. Looking at e-commerce, as discussed earlier, we also need to look at how the private sector changes their business models to now incorporate the new normal, incorporate models that would also include e-commerce. We also need to look at how the immediate environment in our partner states or in our region supports this. In terms of, for example, in most East African countries, we need to look at the physical address system in order to make sure that it really supports the development of e-commerce. Also, we also need to look at how we establish policies that would address issues of consumer protection, and also that will guide the implementation or the adoption of e-commerce in our region. We also need to look at the issue of inclusivity. This is an agreement that is in place, and most people would say that it would favor the multinationals, but we also need to make sure that it goes down to the SMEs, it goes down to the women in trade, which in our context in East Africa, for example, they occupy about 76% of border trade. So we really need to and it has also been highlighted by the CEO, we need to look at the youth in business, because this is the future of the private sector. So we really need to make sure that the agreement is inclusive enough, and in our context, it really needs to benefit the small businesses, which are a majority of our economy. And of course, in realizing the opportunity, and last but not least, is the need of having a clear collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. Of course, the public sector in terms of implementing all the actions of the agreement that would benefit the private sector. And of course, the private sector being the key beneficiaries of this agreement, there needs to be a collaboration in making sure that we worked together in terms of implementing the agreement, in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities that are availed in the agreement, and of course, in terms of realizing the blueprint that is guiding regional integration in Africa and transformation of Africa as envisaged in Agenda 2063. I think it is through collaboration that we'll be able to achieve the realization of having Africa as a global powerhouse and transforming our industries in the continent. So that is it. Thank you very much for listening. Nathan, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Miriam Mondosha. We are very elaborate and indeed very useful. Thank you for coming back to the potential benefits. Thank you for coming back on what is expected of private sector, because we are active players indeed. We are not only at the recipient end, but we are also on, we have a lot to play. Without repeating what Miriam said, let me open the discussion to all of you participants. You might be having something to say, you might be having a question, so that we as a team, we can respond to it. You might be having a suggestion. It's your turn now. Karibu sana, feel free. Be short, be precise, hit to the point so that we can discuss all of us. Thank you very much. I can see Moses' hand is up. I will begin with Moses. Then after Moses, he will also be very, very brief. After Moses, we shall have who else? Yeah, Moses, karibu sana.
Thank you, moderator. I think it's Moses Moses Kanyesije. Hopefully we are not more Moses, so
Moses,
that I speak in the one. Sorry?
It's you who raised the hand.
All right, thank you. My name is Moses Kanyesije, and I work with Youth Leadership Program at MS Training Center for Development Cooperation. And I coordinate youth in business, trade, and enterprise across the region of East African community. I thank EABC for organizing and the Miriam for presentation. My question is, Miriam has highlighted it that across the region, 70%, if not 80% of the economy relies on this informal sector. The drafters of CFTA, at what stage did they involve the youth? At what stage did they involve SMEs? This CFTA is too much of legal text. How many of the youth entrepreneurs, innovators understand this language, understand these protocols, understand these rules of origin, understand these tariffs? At what stage will this text be translated, be unpacked, so that it can be user-friendly? My second observation is that when the CFTA at the initial start, it was going to build at the existing regs. Let me give an example of the African community. We still have problems in trading between partner states, even if it is clear that the product meets the rules of origin. What is there that this CFTA will be implemented if it cannot be implemented at regional level? For now, let me just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Your two concerns are well taken care of. We shall come back to them. Let me welcome someone else. Do I see any hand coming in, or we respond?
There are some questions at the in the chat room. Please address them.
Yes, sir. The first question in the chat room is it was a commendation from Edward, from Richard Mugo, who commended the work that is being done on CFTA by EABC and GIZ. He also asked a question regarding the railway line from Nairobi to Arusha. He was asking whether there are any plan to construct this railway line. My quick answer on this is that the plans are on the central corridor and the northern corridor. I don't know any plan between Nairobi and Arusha. If anybody knows it, then it will contribute. Then second question on the chat room is from Romuling Edward. Romuling Edward, he asked on the mechanism between partner states, an existing mechanism between partner states and private sector, and as far as scoring high on implementation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The mechanism is empowering private sector, building the capacity of private sector. What EABC is doing actually, having private sector at the center of what is being done, not only as beneficiaries, but also as implementers, as actors, as advocates, private sector will be in the advocacy forums. So to me, that is tools that are in place to have the mechanism in place. Again, Edward asked about how are we protecting SMEs from the bigger enterprises when we start implementing Africa Continental Free Trade Area. To me, the protection policies will be catered for when we nurture our SMEs to graduate to the level of participating, of trading across borders. To me, the protection policies may not yield the results as we may have a liberalized trade. So SMEs will trade with SMEs, and they will provide raw materials to big enterprises, and in the long run, they will benefit. The last question in the chat room is about, again raised by Edward, on how are we eliminating NTBs in EAC. In EAC, yes, from private sector point of view, EABC has been raising these NTBs, identifying NTBs and bringing them to the policymakers for discussion. But again, at EAC level, there are some tools like NTB elimination mechanisms, like time-bound programs, like real-time reporting of these NTBs, so that we can have them discussed by the competent authorities. Those are the few questions in the chat room. I may hope that if others come, we shall respond to them, and my colleagues will also help me to do so. Let me welcome any other suggestion from participants present here. Yeah, I can see anybody raising the hand? You're allowed. We still have some few minutes to discuss. You're allowed to say something. I can see from the chat room again, somebody from Nigeria Private Sector Alliance, Legibos Niwabu. He's looking forward to working with EABC. He's commending what EABC is doing. And from Nigeria, he's commending what EABC is doing, and he's committing that as Private Sector Alliance, he will also work with EABC. That is all in the chat room. Then other questions from the chat room. What can EAC do to ensure that its products are competitive enough to compete among other African producers? That is a question from the chat room. What are we doing as EAC to ensure that our products are competitive enough? One, we are working on quality enhancement. We are adding value. We are looking at, we have a policy, at EAC policy, looking at value addition. We have the industry policy. We don't want to trade our products as raw materials. We want to add value to these products so that we can trade them when they have value addition. Secondly, we are looking at value addition in terms of processing and having finished products. Our industrialization policy at EAC level is encouraging partner states to establish very many industries so that we can transform our economies and be able to produce quality products. Another question from the chat room is about the current AfCFTA progress. Miriam alluded to this, but the one who asked wanted progress on e-commerce. E-commerce protocol is in the second phase of negotiations. And these were to start this year, but due to COVID, they were slowed down. There were challenges to commence the second phase of negotiations, but the texts are already prepared, waiting for an opportunity to meet and discuss these texts that are prepared. Another question from the chat room is that EAC SME are in great danger of being wiped out by small-scale vendors from China who are establishing far and wide in the region. This needs urgent concerted attention by the partner states. Yeah, this question is about competition from Chinese vendors, which I may partly believe that what the person was asking is correct or not. To me, our SMEs are becoming competitive. We have policies in place that have made them to look very competitive, and this is helping our SMEs to compete fairly. To compete fairly, because the Chinese products are not much better compared to our made in East Africa products. If you have made in Kenya, made in Uganda, made in Rwanda, or if you bring made in Tanzania, if you bring them together, then you find we are doing better, we are producing better products, other than saying that they are being outcompeted by Chinese. But that's my point of view. Let me hope that others may also have their own view. I can see a hand raised by Annette. Annette, would you please have the floor? I can see a hand from my CEO, Peter Matuki, immediately after Annette.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Mukairanga.
Hello, boss. Thank you Miriam, for the presentation. It pretty highlights a lot of things some of us have been wondering about. But from what we've experienced since COVID-19 hit, it has kind of exposed the underbelly of our health sector, health services within the East African community. How it's not even only the East African community, but in Africa in general. So in terms of that, I think my question is around what are we doing or what are we expecting from the AfCFTA regarding the health sector, the health services? Because let alone the usual consultations and things like that, even if we went into manufacturing as a focus sector in this case, we'll find that we've concentrated a lot in Africa on agro-processing and so many other things, but we haven't really had any focus on health. So as EABC, and do you have any work along those lines? Are you doing any advocacy for the health sector development? Also, don't you feel like this is something we also need to table at the AfCFTA to be considered under the 5 service sectors that were mentioned, so that health also becomes a focus? Because COVID-19 has exposed how weak we are in that sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Annette. Let me welcome CEO Peter Matuki. He might come on our advocacy on heresy, but I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. Karibu, CEO.
Nathan, I'm not very sure I'd raised my hand, but I think what the speaker has raised is important, that indeed, as the East African Business Council's private sector in the region, it is in our interests to make sure that we have all players on board, and that is why the report talks about inclusivity. Inclusivity in the sense that we want all the stakeholders to be part of this process. And therefore, the health sector is key. We have a platform within the framework of EABC that deals with the health sector. And that is to tell you that whatever policy interventions that we have, of course, the health sector well represented. But more importantly, particularly during a time like this that we saw a pandemic come, COVID, we saw again the importance of the health sector, and of course how the health sector, the role they play to ensure that citizens in the continent are safe. And again, ensuring that they worked very closely with businesses to ensure that they reposition themselves to provide some of the very important equipments that were necessary for these to fight this pandemic. So I agree with you that it's important that we have a health sector, and that is why, in the wisdom of course, the framework of African Business Council is a platform that brings on board all the players from all sectors, and that's why we call it African Business Council. And that's why we have now subsectors that participating through the regional economic blocks business councils and stuff like that. So I totally agree that it is important, and it's as important like any other sector. And that is why I totally agree with those also mentioned about SMEs, because SMEs are important and they also have a place to play, a role to play in this in the framework of AfCFTA. And it was in our recommendation that we ask partner states, particularly from the EAC, to provide economic stimulus for SMEs. And the idea is to empower them and give them, of course, motivation to participate in a framework of AfCFTA. The reason why you see Chinese goods come and flood most of these markets is because they get subsidized by their own governments. And therefore becomes our advocacy role as private sector to work closely with the government, that we ask some of these sectors, like SMEs, like the youth, to be supported to participate in this framework of the AfCFTA. In the issue of the rail that runs from one partner state to another, we say that intra-partner states infrastructure development is key. And of course, as Business Council, is one of our advocacy roles to see networks of infrastructure, to see rails, to see roads run across the partner states of the EAC. And therefore, it is not a wonder very soon you will see a railway running from Arusha, from Tanzania, from Dar es Salaam to Nairobi, from Dar es Salaam to Kampala, from Nairobi to Kampala, from Kampala to Kigali, and from Bujumbura to Kigali, from DRC entering into Kigali and so forth, or Kampala into South Sudan. This is in our interest, and that is why we have been advocating for infrastructure development. And therefore that thinking from yourselves, thinking that this is the way to go, that is in our menu as EABC, that we are working closely with governments to ensure that infrastructure becomes key priority as they focus on the bigger picture of AfCFTA. So I don't think we are late. We need to continue working together towards this dream. It's an important dream that we must take advantage of as businesses, as East Africans, and it's for all of us to gain. So that's what I would say for the comments that they are raised. NTBs are becoming an issue, and of course, as EABC, we have been again working closely with governments. We have a program called Public-Private Sector Dialogue structure that makes us engage closely with the governments, particularly to focus on challenges that are facing trade facilitation. And NTBs have been a key challenge, and we're working around that to ensure that as we go into AfCFTA, there's a clear framework to address the non-tariff barriers within the region. Because again, as we face Africa, we need to resolve things or challenges that we are facing at the regional level, at the East African regional level. And that is why it is our focus interest as EABC. We continue working with our partner states, with governments, and that is the spirit. With even the heads of states themselves, feels that we need to work closely with the private sector. If you look at the treaty establishing the East African community, it's very clear that is much of course, is a people-centered, but is a private sector-led regional integration, and that is the spirit. So in the wisdom of those who founded the community, they felt it is important that the private sector play this important role. And so also within the framework of AfCFTA, that's why we are forming African Business Council, to make sure that, of course, we don't leave AfCFTA to governments, but of course we give space to others to participate and make sure that it's anchored well on a very strong private sector participation. So I think that's what I would say for the comments that have been raised here.
Thank you, Edi. Thank you for the good comments. Let me invite Miriam. Miriam Mondosha has a comment to make on what is asked. Miriam, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nathan. Just to start with the last question that was asked by Annette. I think what the agreement provides for first is on the mutual recognition agreement that would enable services, medical services to move freely within the continent. And of course, also, this will be done in the second phase of the negotiations. And also under the protocol of intellectual property right, it also provides for a framework to actually preserve the innovation that has been developed by Africans. We've developed a lot of things that have lost track, as lost track without being patented. So it also provides for that. And also in terms of production, I think we've seen, despite the manufacturing being hit, one of the opportunities was repurposing things that we were importing. A lot of them we started producing locally, especially the PPEs. They've been produced a lot within the region. Also, in terms of ensuring that the SMEs are included in this, what EABC is doing is sensitization mostly. I think one of the initiatives that we've done is today is to tell the private sector what the agreement entails, and we have a series of sensitization workshops that we plan, and also in collaboration with the youth in business through our partnership with ULEAD Summit in this. So we'll make sure that youth is a part of every process. SMEs are part of every process, and even through the African Business Council, where EABC will also represent the private sector at the regional level. All our views will encompass the views of everyone, including SMEs, particularly women and youth in business. So that is it for me, Nathan. Back to you.
Much, Miriam. Thank you. We are soon closing this session. Let me look at the last question. Is Mr. Kamanzi online? Or Kamanzi, please, either you or Brother Amek, there is a question. Is EAC well prepared to benefit from e-commerce? My two brothers who are senior managers at EABC. Is EAC prepared? That is a question from the chat room. Is EAC prepared to benefit from e-commerce? Kamanzi or
Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, Miriam, and thank you everyone for participating in this very important webinar. As you are all aware, the e-commerce, even amidst this COVID pandemic, e-commerce has been the enabler of business, has been the enabler of moving products, and this has been an enabler of moving from the manufacturers to the consumers. So, and a lot of initiatives, e-commerce rollout initiatives have been developed at the regional level to ensure that products move. So honestly, I would say at the regional level, the partner states are ready to roll out or use the e-commerce platforms that have already been developed by each partner state. What we need is basically to coordinate. We need a coordinated approach or a centralized system that can be rolled out, whether it is even having a single platform that can be used. I think in Rwanda we have seen a lot of platforms developed by Jack Ma that have really helped to trade products on the e-commerce platforms. And if this can at least be replicated all over the region, then to the movement of products will be easily facilitated. So I can say the platforms, the willingness is there. We just need to be a bit of adapting the platforms across the region. So of course it is a new normal. We have no choice but embrace e-commerce because it is the only enabling platform that can be able to move the products across not only in the region but all over the continent. Thank you, Nathan.
Kamanzi, for a very clear answer. Let me now take you through the end before we close, before I invite our CEO to close for us. I wish to announce that next week we are continuing with this series of webinars, and the next week one is very, very interesting. It's about value chains. So I invite all of you to be part of this next week. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, please.
Can I make a comment if you don't mind?
Yes, Director. You are most welcome, Director John Rusagara.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Gashaija. All online protocol observed and respected. Are we together?
Yes, you are very clear.
You're very clear.
Go on.
I think as regards this African free trade area, the trends are changing rapidly and we need to keep up with the pace of change. The truth and the reality is that we are all affected by the changes that are rapidly taking place. And to remain relevant, secure, and develop our business, we need to align our businesses to the emerging challenges and opportunities. We must therefore develop a positive attitude towards these changes and seek how to benefit most from the changing environment. The harsh reality that confronts us is that multinationals are not under any obligations to work with us. But through our professional competence and conduct, value addition and competitiveness, we can secure our place in the supply chain. Even then, we need to pull together for the unit of purpose in confronting the challenges of our continent. The challenges brought about by WTO cannot present an opportunity in equal measures. Professionalization of our trade, therefore, is our primary mandate, especially given the global stiff competition forced by our members. I still propose that EABC should have the headquarters of the African free trade, and then we can move it with the experience you guys have gained. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. John Rusagara. John Rusagara is a board director. He's coming back on institutional mechanism to handle private sector interests in Africa continental free trade area. He's making it clear that East Africa should have the headquarters of African Business Council. That is to be discussed, and I hope that our CEO is taking note of that, what the members and what the private sector is requiring. Now, there was a question asked on value addition measures so that our products would be in a better position to fairly compete with Chinese products. I have online Mr. Lamek Wesonga, is our manager in charge of with the sectors of agriculture. Mr. Lamek, can you elaborate something on that question?
And Nathan, kindly repeat the question. I think there was some buffering from your side. Sorry.
Yeah, the question is about what would be the value addition measures so that EAC products may be in a better position to outcompete Chinese products. But no need of outcompeting Chinese products, but the matter of having value added products. What measures in place to have that?
Thank you very much, Nathan. I think the question is two. One is on value addition, and two is on competitiveness. If I may begin with the latter, I think addressing competitiveness, we need to consider several factors. One being the cost of energy, the other being the cost of transport and the logistics, and the other one probably being access to finance. So if you handle the question of transport, for example, avoiding issues of where a 40-feet container from China to Mombasa is landing at $1,000 versus $3,000 from the port of Mombasa to, for example, Kigali, then there we shall be addressing competitiveness. If we talk in terms of energy, if assuming energy was about 5 US cents in China against 17 US cents in Uganda or in Burundi, then there you'll be addressing competitiveness. So until when we address such kind of competitiveness impediments, we are still having challenges. Looking at the cost of credit, if you are borrowing at, for example, 5%, and one is borrowing at about 20%, you are not able to compete with somebody who is borrowing at, for example, 3%. So until when we address such something like that, then we'll be able to compete. And when it comes to, for example, value addition, when I go to number 2, agricultural country. So what we need to do to ensure that we add value to our product. One, we need to look at for example, equipment. Are we having the equipment which can assist our entrepreneurs, and what are some of these kind of incentives which we can give them to add value? If, for example, adding value addition for an SME which is just starting and is supposed to be a positivity, are we saying that, for example, in the first year or second year, able to be exempted from payment of VAT or income tax? So these are kind of opportunities which we need, opportunities or areas we need to look at to ensure that, one, we are able to be competitive, and two, we are able to agricultural produce such that we are in a competition with products which are coming from out. Looking at issues of standards and so on will also be very, very critical. Maybe there's something small which I wanted to add on to Nathan. It was on the e-commerce. I think at the EAC level, the region has embarked on developing a regional e-commerce strategy. And this strategy is aimed at addressing gaps and opportunities in the key policy areas. This will handle areas such as regulatory frameworks, trade facilitation, payment systems, skills development, and so on. And you know, COVID came in at a time when, of course, as private sector, we are always first in tapping into some of these opportunities. And from the EAC private sector perspective, we see that as we are taking part in the formulation of this e-commerce strategy, we can even expand it to the private sector can use it even as we now embark on the continental free trade area. And I think as EABC, we are part of this steering committee at the EAC level, and we shall ensure that what is being put in the strategy is actually able to support private sector to even take part in the continental free trade area. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Amek. Let me close from here and invite Honorable Peter Matuki to close for us. But I will request my senior leader that while closing, there is a youth leader who requested that we simplify this legal text agreement into a friendly, readable way for younger entrepreneurs to consume it and understand it, and and get benefits out of it when they've understood it. Dr. Mathuki, if you are hearing me, sir, karibu sana for closing as you commit as the head of the institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you all of you for participating in this webinar. I want to appreciate the participation, particularly the youth, and that is a point I will start by calling on the youth to take time to internalize, interrogate AfCFTA and see what opportunities that exist for youth. And I can assure you, going forward, it becomes easier for you to see what opportunities that you can make. As we have said, e-commerce is the way to go, and I'm sure youth are very strong, very strong in this, and you can take advantage to support businesses, particularly in digitalization and of course in e-commerce. So I think that's a big opportunity. But I want also to thank my directors who have taken time to really participate in this. I would, in fact, the remarks by John Bosco would have been the closing remarks, because we're very clear that we should focus on realigning ourselves as businesses in terms of how we do business, in terms of how we engage with the rest, in terms of the new normal, not only in our lives, but also in terms of doing business. And I think that there's a very important point to underline. And of course, pulling together. He also talks about pulling together as businesses, as partners. Because again, we cannot face AfCFTA when we are divided. We need to pull together as businesses, business to business, business to government, government to government, so that we can take full advantage of the AfCFTA. And therefore, the issue of again that you've raised on the supporting for value chains, we need to support local value chains, so that if you have a product that is actually produced, for example, in one partner state, it has a component of another partner state. If we have a mobile phone that is manufactured somewhere in East Africa, and part of it is manufactured in Rwanda, or in Tanzania, or in Kenya, in Uganda, in South Sudan, that becomes an East African product. And therefore, when we are facing AfCFTA, we face AfCFTA as East African community. I want to thank all of you for your time, creating time. Next week, the webinar that is there is now more specific, sector specific. We'll be looking at the value chains for leather, particularly because that again a very important area that we need to focus on. And we invite all of you who are in this webinar, of course, to join us next week on Thursday as we run that again very important webinar. I want to thank our partners, GIZ, for your support, continuous support. We cannot take this for granted. And of course, our members who have taken time to participate in this webinar. And of course, the colleagues who have, of course, taken a lot of time to ensure that this webinar is a success. I thank you. And have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peter Mathuki. We also thank you for being a good team leader. Otherwise, thank you to all participants, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.